The field of social psychology has yielded a treasure trove of insight about human nature in the last 50 years. One of the major recurring discoveries of this discipline is the idea that human beings tend to have a really hard time forming correct views about reality, and that beliefs can be readily skewed with predictable statistical precision. One of the more classic demonstrations of just such nature was originally published in 1959 and has been repeatedly confirmed and verified since then. The experiment went as follows. Researchers first rounded up 71 male volunteers for a 2-hour experiment in measures of performance. For 1 full hour, subjects were then given the mundane chore of shuffling spools in a tray and rotating blocks. All the while, an experimenter looked on and took notes, giving the impression that these meaningless tasks were of genuine scientific interest. In reality, the tasks were intended by design to be as dull as possible and to leave the subjects with a negative opinion of the entire ordeal. In the control group, participants were immediately then given a survey and asked to rate the overall experience on an 11-point scale. Questions included things like, were the tasks interesting and enjoyable? Do you think the results may have scientific value? And would you have any desire to participate in another similar experiment like this in the future? As expected, the control group reported the brutal honesty and returned a set of relatively low numbers on their survey. The variable group, however, was not immediately surveyed, but was rather presented with an awkward question by the experimenter. As the story went, a fellow researcher failed to come into work that day, and it would be very helpful if the subject were willing to try out his job. That way, the subject could act as a potential replacement in the event the experimenters needed an extra hand. Subjects from this group were then divided into 2 subgroups based on the pay they would receive during their training run. The first group was paid $1 for their services, while a second group was paid $20. The job was simple enough and simply required the subject to get into a conversation with the next candidate for the experiment. During the conversation, the subject was required to make a sincere point that his time spent with the experiment was exciting, fun, enjoyable, and interesting. Remember now that in reality, the experimental tasks were entirely mundane and monotonous by design. The assigned task for the subjects was therefore the equivalent of telling a lie with the deliberate intention of generating a cognitive dissonance in their minds. So how much is your integrity worth? $1 or $20? And remember, these are $1959. By 2009 standards, that would be the rough equivalent of getting paid either $10 or $200 to tell a lie. After a 2-minute conversation with a female candidate, the experimenter returned to retrieve the subject, who was finally given the same survey as the control group. Interestingly, the $20 group reported similar numbers as the control, expressing an overall negative feeling about the experimental tasks. Yet oddly enough, the surveys from the $1 group were significantly shifted into the positive direction. Isn't that neat? So what does this experiment tell us? Well, one thing really. It tells us that, statistically, when a man expresses an untrue idea with little or no external validation, he will actually change his beliefs to suit the lie. This phenomenon is in fact so reliable and reproducible that it has been given the official title of insufficient justification effect. Now, armed with the knowledge that sincere belief in any arbitrary contention may be engineered through simple expression of that belief, think carefully about the following words.
Another way to seek a testimony seems astonishing when compared with the methods of obtaining other knowledge. We gain or strengthen a testimony by bearing it. Someone even suggested that some testimonies are better gained on the feet bearing them than on the knees praying for them.
This allegedly righteous man, speaking through the inspired power of the Holy Ghost, has just unwittingly stumbled into a well-documented tool of brainwashing and is attempting to pawn off the resulting belief as legitimate spiritual knowledge. Now ask yourself, is this the action of an honest man? Is this the action of a man whose beliefs are evidently correspondent with reality? Or are they the actions of a man who is more concerned with fostering belief rather than building knowledge? Even if his beliefs turned out to be true and correct, it still wouldn't change the fact that he is willfully attempting to manipulate his audience through methods that are well known for their power to lead men into false beliefs. Is that really something you think God would smile upon? How can anyone with a sincere reverence for truth and integrity endorse such behavior? These are not the actions of a man sharing truthful knowledge, but of a man who is brazenly attempting an act of overt psychological manipulation. And this guy is hardly a rare exception. Every sermon, every conversion, every testimony, and every belief from every religion without exception exists on the principle that human beings are intrinsically self-deceptive. And insufficient justification is only one of the many ways of doing this. Just look at all the other documented biases from the peer-reviewed literature. Just like insufficient justification, every last one of these is experimentally reproducible and perfectly capable of leading anyone into beliefs for which there exists no physical correspondence in reality. No religious doctrine in history has yet to emphasize these pitfalls in human nature, because every last religious belief owes its very existence to one or more of them in the first place. And they work great, too. This is why theologians happily resort to such means. They know full well they don't have any hard objective data to support whatever form of deity they prefer to worship, so the only things left are touchy-feely manipulation and good old-fashioned brainwashing. Generating converts is simply more important than developing a physical understanding of reality. This is why anytime scientific progress conflicts with a deeply held doctrine, that knowledge is always met with a maddening, irrational opposition.
And this is how quantum chromodynamics theorizes how quarks interact by exchanging particles on a subatomic level.
You're f***ing stupid!
And if that weren't bad enough, rarely do believers ever resist the urge to apply their biased reasoning into every other aspect of life. This asshole may be one man, but he and others like him influence an audience of millions. And these assholes vote. They get elected to public offices, they sit on juries, they educate our children, and they influence you, me, and everyone else through the force of law. This is what makes religion so vicious. It is not the faith, hope, love, or charity that's the problem. It's the idea that it's perfectly okay to act on beliefs without rigorous efforts to confirm their correspondence in reality. That's the problem. This is why we fight. This is why we make videos. This is why people like me do the things we do. We don't hate God, we are not bitter, and we are certainly not just trying to justify our sinful ways. We do this because we are sick and tired of all you religious retards who can't pull your collective heads out of your fucking asses and start living in reality. You cannot make the world a better place through ignorance, bias, and superstition. No one would be happier than I to discover that God is real and loves us and wants to take care of us. But no matter how beautiful the idea may be, our preferences do not dictate the state of reality. The fact of the matter is, the evidence for God is lacking, and all evidence drummed up in his favor has either been fallacious, fraudulent, or just plain uncompelling. Any honest reverence for truth therefore dictates that he probably isn't there. We do not make this conclusion because we like it or because it serves some selfish end. We make this conclusion because it is evidently correct and because our lives are collectively better off when we form our decisions on ideas that are externally valid.
All glitter and glamour. You say you're giving the people hope? I think you're stealing their hope.
Oh, no, Henry.
As long as the prerequisite for that shining paradise is ignorance, bigotry, and hate, I say the hell with it.